Today we're going to be moving on to lesson 7.2, which is talking about complementary and supplementary angles. So I've got the definitions for both those up on the screen now. Complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees, and supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. You worked with a couple of these yesterday. We're going to continue it today. So we are going to tell whether the angles are complementary, supplementary, or neither. So we've got one angle that's 70 degrees, one angle that's 110. If we remember our two definitions from before, make sure you have these two definitions written down. Complementary angles add up to 90, supplementary angles add up to 180. So to figure out and prove this example, what we're going to have to do is add those two together. So we're going to take 70 plus 110. When I add those two together, I get 180 degrees because these are all in degrees. And so that tells us that this is actually going to be supplementary angles. These are supplementary angles here because when I add them together, they add up to 180 degrees. Alrighty, let's move on to our next example. Now we have this. So we've got an angle that measures 49 degrees and another angle that measures 41 degrees. So I want you to tell me, is this complementary, supplementary, or neither? So pause the video and try this problem out. So you should have added those two numbers together. When you add them together, it equals 90 degrees. That means that the angles are complementary. We've got one more to look at. So we've got an angle that's 128 and an angle that is 62 degrees. So go ahead, solve this problem and tell me complementary, supplementary, or neither. Pause the video now. For this problem, you should have added 128 and 62. When you add those two together, you get 190, which means that it's neither complementary nor supplementary because supplementary is 180 and complementary is 90. For this one, we're going to tell whether the angles are complementary or supplementary, and then we're going to figure out the volume of x. So right off the bat, when I'm looking at this problem here, I know that this is going to be a complementary angle. So remember, complementary is that 90 degrees. And I can tell that because it has that right angle sign right there. And so since it has that little teeny tiny box, that little teeny tiny box tells us that it is 90 degrees. So I know that this angle right here is a 90-degree angle. But I'm trying to figure out the x, so I'm going to have to use the two angles that are on the inside. And so I know if I add those two angles together, 4x plus 36, it's going to give me my 90-degree angle. And this is just a two-step equation. We know how to do this. We're going to draw the line at the equal sign. We're going to be solving for our variable x. That's what we should get at the very end. We always are going to do our addition subtraction first, and we want to get rid of all the numbers on the left side. So we've got a 4 and we've got a 36. If we want to get rid of addition subtraction first, I can see that this is multiplication happening between these two numbers. So this is multiplication. This number is going to be our number that is added. So let's go ahead and do the opposite to both sides. We do the opposite to move it over that line. So the opposite of addition is subtraction. So we're going to subtract 36 away from both sides. That makes that go away because 36 minus 36 equals 0, and 0 plus anything is going to be itself. So 4x plus 0 equals 4x. So it is left on its own on the left. And then 90 minus 36 is going to give us 54. I'm going to move this down just a little bit so I have room. I'm going to move that over as well. So now we have 4x equals 54. So what we're going to do for this problem now is, since I see that multiplication, I'm going to go ahead and do division. So I am dividing both sides by 4, because that's the number that I want to get rid of. I want x to be by itself. And 4 divided by 4 gives me 1. 1 times x is just x. Now we have to take 54 divided by 4, which actually gives us a decimal, but that's okay. It's going to be 13.5. And so our x equals 13.5, and these are complementary angles. And there's a better written version of what I just put up. Now I want you to do this problem here. So first off, tell me, is it complementary or supplementary? Hopefully you're thinking supplementary, because supplementary is 180 degrees. It's a straight line happening right there. It is totally straight, which means it is 180 degrees. Now go ahead and do the math, just like how I did on this problem, to figure out your x's in this problem. So pause the video and try out this problem. And this is your answer. So again, we're adding those two angles together. One angle is just x, the other angle is x minus 4. So we're adding those two together, and it's going to equal 180. We're going to have to combine our like terms. So honestly, these parentheses don't do anything, because parentheses are for distribution and there's nothing to distribute. So I can kind of just get rid of those, and then I'm taking x plus x, which gives me 2 x's, and then I still have my minus 4. And now it looks like a two-step, just like before. We're going to add the 4 to both sides, because that is a subtraction of 4. So when I add 4 to 180, I get 184. And then we're going to divide each side by 2, and that leaves us with x equals 92. Now you're going to tell me always, sometimes, or never. So if x and y are complementary angles, then both x and y are what acute? Are they always, sometimes, or never? So I want you to think about that for a second. So complementary angles means that it is 90 degrees. So if they are complementary angles, that means that they're going to add up to 90 degrees, which means that they always have to be acute. Because remember, acute is anywhere from like about 0 degrees to just below 90 degrees. And exactly 90 gives us a right angle. B says if x and y are supplementary angles, then x is always, or always, sometimes, or never acute. Think about that for a minute. Supplementary angles. For this one, you should put sometimes, because it can be an acute angle, but it doesn't always have to be, because supplementary means 180. And so maybe you have, I don't know, 179 plus 1. That 1 degree would be your acute angle. And so if x was 1, then it would be acute. But if x was at 179, then that would be an obtuse angle. If x is a right angle, then x is blank acute. Always, sometimes, or never. Hopefully this one was easy, and you said never, because if x is a right angle, then it's a right angle. It can't be acute and right. It has to be one or the other. So it can be acute, it can be right, it can be obtuse, or it could be straight. And none of those run into each other. It will never be more than one of those options. Problem D says if x and y are complementary angles, remember 90 degrees, then x and y are blank adjacent. Hopefully you're thinking that they're sometimes adjacent. So adjacent means that they're touching, they're sharing a side. And so if you think back to previous problems, I'm not going to switch back. Sometimes the angles are kind of just next to each other. They're not actually sharing a side, and other times they are sharing a side. So it doesn't have to share a side to be complementary. It just means that the numbers have to add up to 90 degrees. And then x and y are supplementary angles, or if x and y are supplementary angles, then x and y are blank vertical. And they are sometimes vertical. It doesn't always have to be vertical angles, but again, just like with the adjacent, sometimes they touch, sometimes they don't. And all you have now is your homework. So you're going to go to page 280 in your textbook, and you're going to go from 1 to 16. You're going to do all those problems. According to other students in the class, they said that for some reason the links don't work. I don't know how else to do them because that's how I've been doing the links all year. But if you go into Clever, you click Big Ideas, and then you click, I think it's called Student Dynamic Textbook, and then Course 2. That will take you to the textbook. For some reason, the link isn't working anymore, so I'm sorry about that. But if you have any questions, send me an email.